The truth did not arrive with noise or chaos. It surfaced quietly, in fragments, through words spoken without haste, through pauses heavier than any scream. What the public once believed was a tragic accident slowly revealed itself as something far more unsettling. A story not about fate, but about choice. Not about loss alone, but about intent. And as each layer was peeled back, one question echoed across screens and conversations worldwide. How could something so calculated hide in plain sight for so long? For months, the narrative had been simple and almost comforting in its simplicity. A promising life cut short, a moment of misfortune, a cruel twist of destiny. People mourned, shared memories, and moved forward believing there was nothing more to uncover. Yet beneath that accepted version lay a silence that never quite felt right. Details that did not align, reactions that felt rehearsed, and a lingering discomfort that refused to fade. When the woman at the center of the case finally stood before the court, she did not resemble the image many had imagined. There were no tears, no trembling hands, no visible regret. Instead, she carried herself with an unsettling composure, as though she were observing events rather than standing at their heart. Her voice, when she spoke, shifted unpredictably, at times sharp, at times amused, at times eerily calm. Each sentence landed like a controlled release, measured yet deeply disturbing. She did not begin with denial, nor did she rush towards confession. Instead, she spoke in pieces, offering fragments of a story that forced listeners to assemble the truth themselves. What emerged was not a sudden act driven by impulse, but a long, silent build-up shaped by comparison, resentment, and an overwhelming sense of invisibility. She spoke of watching someone rise while feeling herself fade into the background, of applause that sounded like mockery, of admiration that felt like exclusion. This was not framed as hatred born overnight. It was described as something cultivated slowly, nurtured through years of quiet observation. Each success she witnessed became another reminder of her own perceived failure. Each smile directed at him felt, in her words, like a spotlight revealing her absence. What unsettled many was not just what she admitted, but how she described it. Not as guilt, but as inevitability. As the proceedings continued, the story took a darker turn. What had once been assumed to be an isolated incident now appeared to involve people who should have represented safety and trust. Familiar names surfaced, individuals from shared classrooms, shared memories, shared beginnings. The revelation that those once considered close could become participants sent a wave of disbelief through the public. Betrayal, it seemed, did not always arrive wearing the face of an enemy. She spoke of influence rather than force, of persuasion rather than coercion, of knowing which words to use, which fears to awaken, which desires to promise. It was not portrayed as chaos, but as coordination, a sequence of actions designed to appear unremarkable, small steps that, when viewed individually, raised no alarms. Together, however, they formed a pattern too deliberate to ignore. Investigators revealed that what ultimately unraveled the carefully constructed narrative was not a dramatic breakthrough, but a detail easily overlooked. An object kept close, not out of sentimentality, but instinct. Something preserved without thought, even in a moment of vulnerability. That silent witness carried answers long after voices had fallen quiet. When confronted with this evidence, the woman's confidence faltered for the first time, just briefly, but enough. What followed was not a collapse, but a shift. Her words grew colder, more dismissive, as though the exposure of truth mattered less than she had expected. And yet, beneath that dismissal, observers noted something else. An edge of frustration, not at being discovered, but at the idea that the story might end with her. It was then that unease began to spread beyond the courtroom. Her remarks hinted at something larger, something unresolved. She spoke as though the focus placed upon her was misplaced, as though she were not the final chapter, but merely a paragraph. This suggestion, subtle yet persistent, ignited speculation. Could a plan of such complexity truly belong to one individual alone? Or was she part of a broader design, shaped by forces that remained unseen? The way she carried herself added weight to those doubts. There was no urgency to defend herself, no attempt to soften her image. At moments she appeared almost detached, as if secure in the belief that consequences would not reach as far as the public hoped. Such behavior challenged expectations and unsettled even seasoned observers. It raised an uncomfortable possibility that accountability might not be evenly distributed. Outside the courtroom, conversation shifted from shock to reflection. People began revisiting moments once dismissed as coincidence. Connections once ignored now appeared deliberate. The case evolved from a single tragedy into a mirror reflecting uncomfortable truths about envy, ambition, and the quiet spaces where resentment grows unchecked. It forced audiences to confront the idea that harm does not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it waits, patient and unnoticed. Yet amid the darkness of this narrative, another presence remained constant, the memory of the person whose life was lost, not defined by the manner of his passing, but by the impact he left behind. Stories resurfaced of kindness, of professionalism, of moments shared away from cameras and applause. These recollections became acts of quiet resistance against the narrative of cruelty, reminders that legacy cannot be erased by betrayal. As the investigation continues, so too does the demand for clarity. Viewers across continents follow each update not out of morbid curiosity, but out of a shared desire for resolution, for transparency, for assurance that truth, however delayed, will not remain buried. The unanswered questions linger, but so does a collective determination to see the full picture revealed. This story resonates because it speaks to more than one life or one case. It touches on universal fears of being unseen, on the consequences of allowing bitterness to replace dialogue, and on the responsibility society holds to look beyond appearances. It reminds us that silence can be as powerful as speech, and that vigilance often begins with listening closely to what feels wrong. Justice, many believe, is not a single verdict, but a process, one that requires patience, courage, and the willingness to question even the most comfortable assumptions. Whatever the final outcome, this case has already left a mark, urging audiences to remain alert, compassionate, and committed to truth. If you found this story thought-provoking and want to stay informed as new developments unfold, we invite you to support the channel by subscribing. Your presence helps us continue sharing carefully researched updates and meaningful reflections. Thank you for watching, and we hope you will continue this journey with us here on Update X 100H.